Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sleepless Campfire. Tonight, we travel into the forgotten highways of Arizona, specifically the mysterious stretch of Interstate 17 near mile marker 89, where a desert darkness holds stories that refuse to die. This 30-mile corridor between Black Canyon City and Camp Verde has become a focal point for unexplained phenomena involving Arizona state troopers over the past 3 decades. The Arizona Department of Public Safety has logged over 300 unusual incidents in this region since 1987, ranging from inexplicable vehicle disappearances to encounters with entities that defy conventional explanation. Tonight, we will examine 7 of the most disturbing cases drawn from official reports, witness testimony, and internal DPS communications. Each one verified, documented, and analyzed in forensic detail. What makes these incidents particularly compelling is their consistency across different officers, time periods, and weather conditions. The desert landscape surrounding mile marker 89 creates a natural theater where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and where professional law enforcement officers find themselves questioning reality itself. From troopers experiencing missing time to vehicles that vanish without trace. From spectral hitchhikers to unidentified aerial phenomena. These accounts represent some of the most credible paranormal encounters in modern law enforcement history. The documentation is thorough, the witnesses trained observers, and the physical evidence often inexplicable. The American Southwest has long been associated with unexplained phenomena. But what sets these incidents apart is their official nature and the credibility of those reporting them. These are not campfire tales or urban legends, but documented events that occurred during routine traffic stops and patrols. Now, let us begin with our first story. It was late October of 2008 when Trooper Michael Ramirez began his evening shift at the Camp Verde substation. The desert air carried the first hints of autumn coolness as the sun dipped behind the Bradshaw Mountains, casting long shadows across Interstate 17. Ramirez had been with Arizona DPS for 12 years, working primarily the night shift along this stretch of highway. He knew every curve, every mile marker, every pullout between Phoenix and Flagstaff. The evening began routinely. Ramirez processed paperwork from his previous shift, checked his equipment, and received his patrol assignment, Sector 4, covering the area from mile marker 75 to mile marker 105. As he walked to his patrol vehicle, the radio crackled with routine traffic dispatch calls, status checks, the ordinary rhythm of highway patrol. Nothing about this evening suggested it would become one of the most unusual cases in DPS history. At approximately 9:47 p.m., Ramirez pulled onto the southbound lanes of I-17, his cruiser's headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. The highway was relatively quiet, with only occasional vehicles passing in either direction. The desert night was settling in, bringing with it the profound silence that characterizes this remote stretch of highway. Ramirez settled into the familiar rhythm of patrol, watching for speeders, disabled vehicles, and any signs of trouble along the roadside. The first anomaly appeared at mile marker 92, just 3 miles north of his focal point. A convoy of 3 black SUVs with government plates passed him at precisely 75 miles per hour, the speed limit, but unusual in its exact precision. Ramirez noted the vehicles in his log, thinking nothing of it initially. Government convoys were not uncommon along this route, though typically they traveled in larger groups and during daylight hours. What caught his attention was the vehicle's configuration: 3 identical black Chevrolet Suburbans, maintained in pristine condition, with dark tinted windows that reflected nothing of the interior. They moved in perfect formation, maintaining equal distances between vehicles, their synchronized movement almost mechanical in nature. Ramirez watched them in his rearview mirror until they disappeared around the curve just south of mile marker 89. The escalation began 5 minutes later when Ramirez approached the same curve. The Suburbans were nowhere in sight, not unusual given their speed, but puzzling given the highway's clear visibility ahead. As he rounded the bend, Ramirez expected to see their taillights in the distance. Instead, he found only empty highway stretching into the darkness. He radioed dispatch to report the vehicles and request information about any scheduled government convoys. "Dispatch, this is Unit 734. I'd like to check on any scheduled government convoys through Sector 4 tonight. 3 black Suburbans, government plates, just passed me at marker 92 southbound." The response came quickly. "Negative, Unit 734. No scheduled convoys reported for this sector tonight. Can you provide the plate numbers?" Ramirez pulled over to the shoulder, activated his dash camera replay, and zoomed in on the convoy as it had passed. The image quality was clear enough to read the plates, but what he saw made his blood run cold. The license plates appeared to be standard government plates, but the numbering sequence was impossible. All 3 vehicles bore identical plate numbers. A physical impossibility under any issuing authority. As he stared at the screen, the radio crackled again, this time with a report from Trooper Sarah Jenkins, patrolling 20 miles south at mile marker 72. "Dispatch, I've got 3 black Suburbans northbound here, matching the description from Unit 734. They just passed me at marker 72. Ramirez felt a cold chill despite the desert air. There was no way the convoy could have covered 20 miles in the few minutes since passing him, nor could they have turned around without being seen. The highway had no exits between his position and Jenkins's location. The quiet climax occurred when Ramirez decided to investigate further. He drove south to mile marker 89, the point between his and Jenkins's positions. As he approached the marker, his cruiser's engine began to sputter, his radio filled with static, and his dashboard lights flickered erratically. He pulled over, noting the temperature gauge had risen dramatically despite the cool night air. When he stepped out of his vehicle, Ramirez noticed something impossible in the desert beside the highway. 3 sets of fresh tire tracks leading to nowhere, as if the vehicles had simply vanished into thin air. The tracks ended abruptly in the desert scrub, with no indication of where they had gone. There were no turn marks, no evidence of vehicles leaving the highway, just 3 parallel tracks that stopped as if the vehicles had been lifted from the ground. The aftermath was documented thoroughly. Ramirez called for backup, and 2 additional troopers arrived to witness the scene. They photographed the tire tracks, measured them, and found they matched the tread pattern of the Suburbans Ramirez had observed. The tracks led into the desert for approximately 50 feet before ending inexplicably. No tracks led away from the site. Internal DPS report 08-10-27-734 remains active but unsolved. The dash camera footage was analyzed by experts who could not explain the identical plate numbers. The tire tracks were examined by forensic specialists who found no evidence of tampering or artificial creation. The convoy was never seen again, nor was any explanation found for how 3 vehicles could disappear so completely from a remote stretch of desert highway. No trace of the convoy was ever found beyond those mysterious tire tracks that led to nowhere in the Arizona desert. It was early March of 2015 when Trooper Jessica Chen began her graveyard shift. The desert spring brought unpredictable weather, and tonight was no exception. An unseasonable cold front had moved through the region, leaving the air crisp and clear. Chen had transferred to Arizona DPS from California 6 months earlier, seeking the quieter pace of rural patrol. Her previous experience in urban law enforcement had prepared her for many situations, but nothing in her training had prepared her for what she would encounter tonight. Chen's shift began uneventfully. She reviewed recent incident reports, noting with interest that several troopers had reported unusual activity near mile marker 89 over the past month, mostly minor anomalies like equipment malfunctions or strange lights. The senior troopers dismissed these reports as desert phenomena or equipment issues. But Chen made a mental note to remain vigilant in that area. At 2:13 a.m., Chen received a dispatch call about a disabled vehicle near mile marker 89. Unit 8112, we have a report of a stranded motorist, female, standing beside a silver sedan near mile marker 89 northbound. Caller reports seeing flashers, but the vehicle appears abandoned now. Chen responded immediately, heading north from her position near Camp Verde. The highway was nearly empty at this hour, with only occasional truck traffic moving through the night. As she approached mile marker 89, Chen spotted the vehicle, a silver sedan pulled onto the shoulder, emergency flashers blinking rhythmically in the darkness. But there was no sign of the reported motorist. Chen parked behind the sedan, approached cautiously, and found the driver's side door ajar. Keys still in the ignition, engine running. A preliminary search revealed no signs of foul play or struggle. The vehicle was registered to a Phoenix resident, but there was no cell phone, wallet, or identification inside. Chen ran the plates and contacted dispatch to run a welfare check on the registered owner. While waiting for information, Chen began a more thorough search of the area. The desert terrain around mile marker 89 was rugged, with steep embankments dropping into arroyos and washes. Chen swept her flashlight across the landscape, noting how the cold front had left a light frost on the desert vegetation unusual for this time of year in Arizona. The first anomaly appeared as Chen scanned the embankment east of the highway. For just a moment, she caught sight of a figure standing near a mesquite tree approximately 50 yards from the road. The figure appeared to be a woman in a light-colored dress, odd attire for the cold desert night. When Chen trained her flashlight on the spot, the figure was gone. Chen radioed dispatch. "I'm seeing some movement in the desert east of the highway near the disabled vehicle. Possible female subject, but she vanished when I illuminated the area. I'm going to investigate." As Chen approached the mesquite tree, she noticed something. Strange, the ground beneath was undisturbed, showing no footprints despite the soft, frost-covered soil. The area was completely silent, with none of the usual desert night sounds. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The escalation came when Chen returned to her vehicle to request backup. As she approached the sedan, she noticed the flashers had stopped, though she hadn't turned them off. The engine was now cold, as if it had been off for hours rather than minutes. Chen tried her radio but received only static, despite being in an area with normally clear reception. At that moment, Chen saw the figure again this time, standing directly beside the disabled vehicle. The woman appeared to be in her early 20s, wearing a simple summer dress and sandals, completely inappropriate for the cold night. Her hair was wet, as if she had just come from a shower, and she seemed to be shivering. Chen approached slowly, speaking in a calm, reassuring voice. "Ma'am, are you all right? I'm Trooper Chen with Arizona DPS. Someone reported you were stranded here." The woman turned to face Chen, and what the trooper saw made her heart stop. The woman's face was pale, almost translucent in the flashlight beam, and her eyes held a profound sadness that seemed to stretch beyond the moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm waiting for someone," she said. "He promised he'd come back for me." Chen asked for the woman's name, but received no response. Instead, the woman began walking slowly toward the highway, her bare feet making no sound on the gravel shoulder. Chen followed, maintaining a professional distance while trying to engage the woman in conversation. "What's your name, ma'am? Where are you headed? Do you need medical assistance?" the woman stopped at the edge of the highway, looking south as if expecting someone to arrive. "He said he'd be right back," she whispered. "He just needed to get help." That was yesterday. The quiet climax occurred when Chen attempted to take the woman's arm to guide her to the patrol car for safety and evaluation. As Chen's fingers made contact, a profound cold shot through her hand, so intense that she pulled back involuntarily. In that instant, the woman vanished, not walking away, not fading gradually, but disappearing as if someone had flipped a switch. Chen stood frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. She checked her hand, which was now numb and pale, the cold sensation lingering despite the desert air. When she looked back at the disabled vehicle, she noticed something she hadn't seen before: a faded memorial cross attached to the guardrail just beyond where the sedan was parked. The aftermath was documented in DPS report 15-03-12-812. When backup arrived 10 minutes later, they found Chen sitting in her patrol vehicle, attempting to warm her hand. The disabled sedan was still there, but now it was clear that it had been abandoned for some time. A layer of dust covered the Hame vehicle, and the battery was dead, incapable of running the flashers Chen had initially observed. Further investigation revealed that the vehicle belonged to a Phoenix woman who had been reported missing 2 weeks earlier. She had last been seen leaving a restaurant with her boyfriend, who later told police they had car trouble near mile marker 89, and he had gone for help, leaving her with the vehicle. When he returned with assistance, both she and the vehicle were gone. The most chilling discovery came when Chen researched local incidents. 20 years earlier, almost to the day, a woman had been killed in a hit-and-run at mile marker 89. Her boyfriend had left her beside the road to get help after their car broke down. When he returned, she was gone. Her body was found 2 days later in a desert wash nearby. She had been wearing a summer dress, and her death was attributed to exposure as much as to injuries from the accident. No connection between the cases was ever officially established, but Chen noted that the memorial cross she discovered matched the description of the one placed at the site of the 1995 incident. The disabled vehicle was eventually impounded and returned to its owner's family, but the mystery of the spectral hitchhiker remains unsolved. Chen never worked another night shift along that stretch of highway, requesting a transfer to day duty in Phoenix shortly after the incident. The official report remains open, classified as an unexplained encounter. It was early November of 2002 when Trooper David Martinez began his afternoon shift. The autumn colors were beginning to appear in the high desert, though the dominant palette remained the browns and grays of the Arizona landscape. Martinez had been with Arizona DPS for 8 years, working primarily the rural stretches of highway north of Phoenix. He was known among his colleagues for his meticulous record-keeping and his methodical approach to patrol work. The day began typically. Martinez attended the morning briefing, where the sergeant mentioned recent reports of unusual activity near mile marker 89, primarily sightings of strange lights and equipment malfunctions. Martinez made a note of this information, as his patrol area included that stretch of I-17. He checked his equipment, signed out his patrol vehicle, and headed north from the Phoenix substation. At approximately 3:45 p.m., Martinez radioed dispatch to report his position at mile marker 75, heading north. The weather was clear, with temperatures in the mid-60s, pleasant for November in Arizona. Traffic was moderate, with a mix of local commuters and long-distance travelers moving between Phoenix and Flagstaff. The first anomaly appeared at mile marker 87, just 2 miles south of the focal point. Martinez's radio began to experience interference, with static increasing as he approached mile marker 89. At first, he attributed this to the mountainous terrain, which often caused communication issues in this area. He adjusted his frequency and continued his patrol, maintaining visual observation of traffic from a roadside turnout. What happened next was reconstructed from dispatcher logs, witness statements, and Martinez's own dash camera footage, which continued recording even when radio communication failed. At 4:02 p.m., Martinez's voice came over the radio, strained and urgent. "Dispatch, this is Unit 511. I've got a disabled vehicle at mile marker 89 northbound. Silver pickup truck, appears to be abandoned. I'm approaching to investigate now." Static followed, then Martinez's voice again. "Subject appears to be standing in the desert east of the highway. White male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing dark clothing. He's not responding to verbal commands." More static then. "Subject is moving away from the highway into the desert. I'm pursuing on foot, requesting backup to my location." This was the last transmission received from Martinez. Dispatch attempted to raise him repeatedly, with no response. They contacted the nearest available unit trooper Robert Jenkins, patrolling approximately 10 miles south, and requested immediate assistance. The escalation began when Jenkins arrived at mile marker 89, approximately 15 minutes later. He found Martinez's patrol vehicle parked on the shoulder, emergency lights still flashing, driver's side door open. The silver pickup truck was there as described, parked further ahead, also abandoned. But there was no sign of Martinez or the subject he had been pursuing. Jenkins immediately called for additional units and began a systematic search of the area. The desert terrain east of the highway was rugged, with steep embankments and dense vegetation in places. Jenkins followed what appeared to be footprints leading away from the highway. But they disappeared after approximately 50 yards, with no indication of where Martinez or the subject had gone. The quiet climax occurred when Jenkins discovered Martinez's duty belt lying on the ground near where the footprints ended. His service weapon, radio, and other equipment were still attached to the belt, which showed no signs of struggle. Jenkins noted that the belt appeared to have been carefully placed on the ground, not dropped or discarded in a struggle. As Jenkins examined the scene, he noticed something strange, and the air around him felt unusually still and quiet. Even the normal desert sounds were absent. There was no wind, no bird calls, no insect noise. The silence was so profound that Jenkins later described it as deafening. At that moment, Jenkins heard what sounded like Martinez's voice calling his name from the direction of the nearby hills. The voice was faint but clear, and Jenkins immediately responded, running toward the sound with his weapon drawn. He called out Martinez's name repeatedly, but received no response beyond the initial call of his name. The aftermath was one of the largest search operations in Arizona DPS history. Over 50 personnel from multiple agencies participated in a 3-day search of the area surrounding mile marker 89. Helicopters with thermal imaging equipment scanned the desert day and night. Tracking dogs were brought in, but they lost the scent almost immediately, behaving erratically as if confused or frightened. Martinez was never found. The investigation, documented in DPS Report 2-11-07511, revealed several puzzling details. Analysis of Martinez's dash camera footage showed that it continued recording for approximately 20 minutes after his last radio transmission. The footage showed the empty highway and desert, with no movement or unusual phenomena visible. However, audio experts who analyzed the recording detected a low-frequency hum that began approximately 1 minute after Martinez's last transmission and continued until the recording ended. The silver pickup truck was traced to a Phoenix resident who reported it stolen 2 days earlier. The owner had no explanation for how it ended up at mile marker 89, nor could he identify any potential suspects. The vehicle showed no signs of tampering or unusual wear. Perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the case was the discovery of Martinez's duty belt. Forensic examination revealed no fingerprints other than Martinez's own, no signs of struggle, and no DNA evidence from any other person. The belt appeared to have been removed voluntarily and placed carefully on the ground, as if Martinez had intentionally taken it off before disappearing. The investigation remained active for 5 years before being reclassified as a cold case. Martinez was officially declared dead in 2007, though no body was ever found. His disappearance remains one of the most mysterious cases in Arizona law enforcement history. Several theories have been proposed over the years: that Martinez was attacked by a stranger, that he experienced some kind of psychological break, or that he encountered something unexplainable in the Arizona desert. But none of these theories explain all the facts of the case, particularly the careful placement of his duty belt and the absence of any signs of struggle. To this day, troopers patrolling near mile marker 89 occasionally report hearing what sounds like a faint voice on the wind, calling a name that sounds remarkably like Jenkins. These reports are unofficial, shared quietly among the officers who work this stretch of highway. No trace of Trooper David Martinez was ever found beyond his duty belt, lying in the desert where the footprints ended. It was late January of 2011 when Trooper Kevin O'Malley began his evening shift. The winter desert was cold, with temperatures dropping into the 30s as night fell. O'Malley had been with Arizona DPS for just under 2 years, still relatively new to the department, but already familiar with the quirks of patrolling rural highways. He had heard stories about strange occurrences near mile marker 89, but dismissed them as veteran troopers' tall tales. The evening began routinely. O'Malley attended the shift briefing, received his patrol assignment, and checked his equipment. The sergeant mentioned that several troopers had reported equipment malfunctions near mile marker 89 recently, but attributed this to the cold weather and aging equipment. O'Malley made a mental note, but didn't give it much thought as he headed out to his patrol vehicle. At approximately 8:15 p.m., O'Malley was driving northbound on I-17, approaching mile marker 89. The highway was nearly empty, with only occasional vehicles passing in either direction. The desert night was clear and cold, with a nearly full moon illuminating the landscape. O'Malley was maintaining a steady speed, running radar for speeders, when he noticed a vehicle ahead that appeared to be driving erratically. The first anomaly appeared as O'Malley closed the distance to the vehicle, a late-model sedan, dark color, weaving slightly within its lane. O'Malley activated his radar and noted that the vehicle was traveling at approximately 85 miles per hour in a 75 mph zone. While not excessively fast, the combination of speed and erratic movement warranted a traffic stop. O'Malley activated his emergency lights and initiated the stop. The sedan pulled over immediately onto the shoulder, coming to a smooth stop just south of mile marker 89. O'Malley followed protocol, calling in the stop to dispatch and positioning his patrol vehicle at an angle behind the sedan. "Dispatch, this is Unit 619. I'm making a traffic stop at mile marker 88.7 northbound, dark sedan, single occupant. Reason for stop, speeding and lane deviation." The response came immediately. "Copy, Unit 619. Proceed with caution." O'Malley approached the vehicle on the driver's side, flashlight in hand, following standard procedure. As he neared the driver's window, he noted that the occupant was a male, approximately 30 to 40 years old, wearing a suit and tie, unusual attire for this time of night in this remote area. The escalation began when O'Malley asked for the driver's license and registration. The man complied immediately, handing over the documents without question. O'Malley noted that the license appeared valid, identifying the driver as James Wilson of Phoenix. The registration matched the license and the vehicle information. What struck O'Malley as odd was the man's demeanor. He was unusually calm, almost unnaturally so, with no signs of nervousness or concern about the traffic stop. His hands remained visible on the steering wheel, his posture relaxed, his expression neutral. When O'Malley asked if he knew why he had been stopped, the man simply replied, "I was driving too fast." O'Malley returned to his patrol vehicle to process the license and check for any warrants. As he entered the information into his computer, he noticed something strange. The system kept returning an error message, unable to process the license number. After 3 attempts, O'Malley radioed dispatch to have them run the information. "Dispatch, can you run a license check for me? James Wilson, DOB 05-12-1975, license number W4329876. My system isn't processing." The response came after a brief pause. "Negative, Unit 619. That license number doesn't exist in our system. Are you sure you copied it correctly?" O'Malley double-checked the license and repeated the number. Dispatch tried again with the same result. At this point, O'Malley began to feel uneasy. Something about this situation wasn't right. The quiet climax occurred when O'Malley decided to return to the sedan to question the driver further. As he approached the vehicle, he noticed that the driver's posture hadn't changed, still relaxed, hands on the steering wheel, looking straight ahead. O'Malley tapped on the driver's window, but there was no response. He tapped again, more insistently, with the same result. Growing concerned, O'Malley tried the door handle and found it unlocked. As he opened the door, he discovered something impossible. The car was empty. There was no one in the driver's seat or anywhere else in the vehicle. The engine was still running, the lights were on, but the driver had vanished. O'Malley immediately called for backup, his voice betraying his confusion and alarm. "Dispatch, this is Unit 619. I need immediate backup at my location at mile marker 88.7. The driver of the vehicle I stopped has disappeared." As he waited for backup to arrive, O'Malley searched the area around the vehicle. There were no footprints in the sandy soil, no indication of where the driver could have gone. The desert terrain east of the highway was rugged and would have been difficult to navigate in the dark, especially in dress shoes. Yet there was no sign of movement in any direction. The aftermath was documented in DPS Report 11-801-27-619. When backup arrived 10 minutes later, they found O'Malley standing beside the still-running sedan, thoroughly confused by the situation. The responding troopers searched the vehicle and surrounding area, but found no trace of the driver. The vehicle's VIN was traced to a rental car company in Phoenix. When contacted, the company confirmed that the car had been rented to James Wilson 3 days earlier and was due back the following day. However, when they tried to contact Wilson at the number provided in the rental agreement, they discovered that the number was disconnected. Further investigation revealed that there was no James Wilson matching the description on the driver's license. The license itself appeared genuine, with all the appropriate security features, but the Department of Motor Vehicles had no record of issuing such a license to anyone with that name and date of birth. Perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the case was the condition of the sedan. When it was finally towed to the DPS impound lot, technicians discovered that the vehicle had no identifying marks other than the VIN. There were no fingerprints anywhere inside or outside the car, despite the driver having handled the license and registration. The vehicle was clean, almost sterile, as if it had never been driven before. The investigation hit dead end after dead end. The rental car company had no security camera footage of Wilson renting the car. The credit card used for the rental was a prepaid card with no traceable owner. The address provided on the rental agreement turned out to be a vacant lot in a Phoenix suburb. To this day, the identity of the phantom driver remains unknown. The case was officially closed after 6 months due to lack of leads. though it remains a topic of discussion among DPS troopers who patrol the area near mile marker 89. O'Malley never forgot his encounter with the Phantom driver. In the years that followed, he became one of the troopers who reported unusual phenomena in that area: equipment malfunctions, strange lights, and an occasional feeling of being watched when no one was around. No explanation was ever found for the driver who vanished from a locked running car on a cold desert night near mile marker 89. It was early December of 2016 when a series of unusual events began to unfold along the stretch of Interstate 17 near mile marker 89. What started as isolated reports from individual troopers quickly escalated into a mass sighting involving multiple law enforcement officers, civilians, and even air traffic controllers. The incident would become one of the most thoroughly documented, unexplained phenomena in Arizona DPS history. The evening began typically for the troopers on duty. Trooper Maria Rodriguez was working the southbound lanes, while Trooper James Thompson covered northbound. Both were experienced officers with over a decade of service each. The weather was clear and cold, with excellent visibility despite the early winter darkness. Traffic was light, as was usual for a Tuesday evening in this remote area. At approximately 9:48 p.m., Rodriguez radio dispatched to report a strange light in the sky east of her position near mile marker 89. Dispatch, this is Unit 721. I'm observing an unusual light in the sky east of the highway at approximately marker 89. It appears to be stationary, white-blue in color, much brighter than any star or planet I've seen in this area. Before dispatch could respond, Thompson's voice came over the radio. Dispatch, Unit 723. I'm seeing the same light from my position near marker 90. It's definitely not an aircraft. No navigation lights, no sound, and it's hovering motionless. The first anomaly was confirmed when both troopers described the same phenomenon independently. What made this particularly noteworthy was that both officers were trained observers, familiar with the night sky and capable of distinguishing conventional aircraft from unusual phenomena. Both described the light as brighter than Venus, with a distinctive blue-white color that seemed to pulse subtly. The escalation began when the light began to move. According to both troopers' reports, the object suddenly accelerated from a stationary position to incredible speed, covering the distance from the eastern horizon to directly above the highway in less than 2 seconds. This movement was completely silent and violated any known principles of conventional aircraft operation. At this point, dispatch began receiving calls from civilians in the area reporting the same phenomenon. Truck drivers on I-17, residents of nearby communities, and even employees at a gas station in Black Canyon City all reported seeing the unusual light. Some described it as a disc-shaped object, while others perceived it as a simple bright light. All agreed on its unusual movement patterns and complete silence. The quiet climax occurred when the object descended rapidly toward the highway near mile marker 89, coming to a hover approximately 100 feet above the ground. Both Rodriguez and Thompson stopped their vehicles and exited to observe with binoculars. What they saw defied an easy explanation. Rodriguez later described it as a disc-shaped craft, approximately 100 feet in diameter, with a series of lights around its perimeter. The bottom appeared to be rotating, though there was no sound. The entire object seemed to be made of a dark material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Thompson's description was similar, but with additional details. There was a series of rectangular windows or openings around the middle of the craft. A soft, blue-white light emanated from these openings. The craft moved with a precision that seemed impossible. It could change direction instantly, stop and start without acceleration or deceleration, and hover completely motionless. At this point, both troopers were documenting the event with their patrol car cameras. The footage, later analyzed by experts, showed a bright object that appeared to change shape and move in ways that defied conventional explanation. The footage also captured something unusual as the object hovered above the highway. All electronic equipment in both patrol vehicles began to malfunction. Rodriguez's radio began emitting static. Her dashboard lights flickered erratically, and her engine sputtered before dying completely. Thompson experienced similar issues, with his vehicle's electrical system failing as the object passed overhead. Both troopers reported feeling a strange sensation, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to penetrate their bodies, causing a tingling sensation in their extremities. The aftermath was documented thoroughly. As word of the incident spread, additional law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, along with representatives from the local sheriff's department and even a team from Luke Air Force Base. By the time they arrived, the object had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind only confused witnesses and malfunctioning equipment. In the days that followed, a formal investigation was launched, documented in DPS Report 16-12-06-721. The dash camera footage from both patrol vehicles was analyzed by experts from multiple agencies. While some suggested the footage showed conventional aircraft viewed under unusual conditions, others admitted that the object's movement patterns and characteristics were inconsistent with any known aircraft. Perhaps the most compelling evidence came from air traffic controllers at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, who had tracked the object on radar as it moved through their airspace. According to their reports, the object appeared on radar suddenly, moved at speeds exceeding 5,000 miles per hour, changed direction instantly, and then vanished from radar screens without explanation. Multiple civilian witnesses came forward with similar accounts. A truck driver who had pulled over at mile marker 89 captured clear video of the object on his cell phone. A family returning from a weekend in Flagstaff described the object in detail. Even a group of amateur astronomers camping nearby witnessed the event, providing detailed descriptions that matched those of the law enforcement officers. The investigation was officially closed after 3 months with no definitive explanation. The official report concluded that the witnesses had observed unidentified aerial phenomena of unknown origin. Unofficially, many of the investigators admitted that what they had seen was unlike anything they could explain within the bounds of conventional science. In the years that followed, additional reports of similar phenomena were documented in the same area, though none involved as many witnesses or as much evidence as the December 2016 incident. The troopers involved in the mass sighting continued to work their shifts, though both Rodriguez and Thompson reported a heightened awareness of the night sky and a renewed respect for the mysteries that might hover above the Arizona desert. No explanation was ever found for the object that appeared above mile marker 89 on that cold December night. Witnessed by dozens of credible observers and documented on multiple recording devices, it was early April of 2019 when Trooper Amanda Blake began her afternoon shift. The Arizona spring was in full swing, with temperatures climbing into the 80s and the desert landscape showing hints of green from recent rains. Blake had been with Arizona DPS for 5 years, transferring from a municipal police department in Tucson. She was known for her practical approach to law enforcement and her skepticism regarding unusual phenomena. The day began typically. Blake attended the morning briefing, where the sergeant mentioned that several troopers had reported experiencing what they described as time anomalies near mile marker 89 recently. Most of these reports involved minor discrepancies, clocks running backward, GPS devices showing impossible locations, or brief periods of disorientation. Blake listened politely, but privately dismissed these reports as imagination or equipment malfunctions. At approximately 2:30 p.m., Blake was driving northbound on I-17, approaching mile marker 89. The highway was moderately busy with weekend traffic heading north to the high country. The weather was clear and warm, with only a few scattered clouds in the otherwise blue sky. Blake was maintaining a steady pace, monitoring traffic flow and watching for any violations. The first anomaly appeared as Blake passed mile marker 87. Her digital clock, which had previously read 2:32 p.m., suddenly flipped to 2:15 p.m. Blake noticed this immediately, as she had been checking the time in anticipation of a scheduled shift change at 3 p.m. She assumed it was a glitch in the clock and didn't give it much thought, continuing her patrol. What happened next was reconstructed from Blake's own testimony, dispatch logs, and physical evidence. As Blake approached mile marker 89, she noticed a vehicle pulled onto the shoulder ahead, a vintage convertible, red, with its hood up as if experiencing engine trouble. As is standard procedure, Blake pulled behind the vehicle to offer assistance. When Blake exited her patrol car, she immediately noticed something strange. The air felt different, cooler than it had just moments before. The sky, which had been clear and sunny, now appeared to have a yellowish tint, as if viewed through a filter. The traffic on the highway, which had been moderate moments before, had completely disappeared. Blake approached the convertible cautiously, noting its vintage appearance, a late 1950s model in pristine condition. A man was leaning against the driver's side fender, dressed in period-appropriate clothing, a white short-sleeved shirt, dark trousers, and polished dress shoes. He appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s, with neatly combed dark hair. The escalation began when Blake spoke to the man. "Afternoon, sir. I'm Trooper Blake with Arizona DPS. Having some trouble with your vehicle?" The man turned to face Blake, and what she saw made her question reality. His clothing, his hairstyle, even his manner of speech seemed out of place in 2019. When he spoke, his voice had a formal quality that seemed more suited to an earlier era. "Yes, officer. I seem to be having some car trouble. I was on my way to Phoenix for a business meeting and the engine just died. I'm afraid I'm not very mechanically inclined." Blake noted that the man's vehicle had no license plates, though vintage cars sometimes displayed different types of registration. What struck her as odd was the pristine condition of both the car and the man's clothing, not a speck of dust or sign of wear, despite the apparent engine trouble. As Blake examined the vehicle, she noticed something impossible. The engine was a type that hadn't been used in automobiles since the early 1960s. Yet it appeared brand new, with no signs of wear or corrosion. The entire vehicle seemed to be in museum-quality condition, despite apparently being driven on the highway. The quiet climax occurred when Blake returned to her patrol car to call for assistance. As she approached the vehicle, she noticed that her digital clock now read 2:45 p.m., 13 minutes later than when she had first stopped, though Blake felt that only a few minutes had passed. More disturbingly, when she tried her radio, she received only static, despite being in an area with normally clear reception. At that moment, Blake looked back at the convertible and discovered something impossible. The man and his vehicle were gone. There was no indication of where they had gone, no tire tracks on the shoulder, no sign that they had ever been there. The highway was still empty. The sky still had that yellowish tint, and the air remained unusually cool. Blake immediately called dispatch on her cell phone, which was working normally. "Dispatch, this is Trooper Blake. I need assistance at mile marker 89 northbound. I was just speaking with a motorist here, and he and his vehicle have disappeared." The response came immediately. "Copy, Trooper Blake. What's your 20? We haven't heard from you since your status check at 2:15 p.m. Blake was confused. She hadn't made a status check at 2:15 p.m. In fact, according to her recollection, she had been approaching mile marker 87 at that time. She told dispatch this. but the dispatcher insisted that Blake had called in her position at mile marker 89 at 2:15 p.m., then gone silent until her current call. The aftermath was documented in DPS Report 1904-13742. When backup arrived approximately 20 minutes later, they found Blake sitting in her patrol vehicle, visibly shaken by her experience. The responding troopers searched the area but found no trace of the vintage convertible or its driver. Further investigation revealed several puzzling details. Analysis of Blake's patrol car GPS showed that the vehicle had indeed been at mile marker 89 at 2:15 p.m., though Blake had no memory of being there at that time. The GPS also showed that the vehicle had remained stationary at that location until 2:58 p.m., though Blake's recollection was that she had only stopped for a few minutes. Perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the case was the discovery of physical evidence that shouldn't have existed. When investigators examined the shoulder where the convertible had supposedly been parked, they found tire impressions that matched vintage tire types not manufactured since the early 1960s. The impressions were clear and well-defined, as if the vehicle had been there recently, but they ended abruptly with no indication of where the vehicle had gone. The investigation hit dead end after dead end. There was no record of a vintage convertible matching Blake's description being registered in Arizona or any surrounding state. The man Blake described matched no missing persons reports. The entire incident seemed to exist outside of normal reality. In the weeks that followed, Blake underwent psychological evaluation and was cleared for duty, though she requested a transfer to a different patrol area. The official report remained open but inactive, classified as an unexplained encounter with possible time displacement elements. Blake never forgot her experience at mile marker 89. In subsequent years, she became interested in theoretical physics, particularly theories about multiple dimensions and time displacement. She occasionally spoke with other troopers who had similar experiences in the same area, though most were reluctant to discuss them officially. No explanation was ever found for the man and his vintage convertible that appeared and disappeared at mile marker 89, leaving behind only tire tracks from a bygone era and a trooper with a missing 43 minutes of her life. It was late June of 2020 when Trooper Daniel Carter began his evening shift. The Arizona summer was in full force, with temperatures remaining in the 90s even after sunset. Carter had been with Arizona DPS for 3 years, transferring from a sheriff's department in rural Arizona. He was familiar with the challenges of patrolling remote desert highways, but had not yet experienced any of the unusual phenomena associated with mile marker 89. The evening began typically. Carter attended the shift briefing, where the sergeant mentioned that several troopers had reported seeing what appeared to be phantom vehicles near mile marker 89. Recently, vehicles that would appear on radar or in visual sightings, but would disappear when approached. Carter listened with interest, but remained skeptical, attributing these reports to desert mirages or equipment issues. At approximately 10:15 p.m., Carter was driving northbound on I-17, approaching mile marker 89. The highway was nearly empty, with only occasional truck traffic moving through the night. The desert air was warm and still, with a nearly full moon illuminating the landscape. Carter was maintaining a steady speed, running radar for speeders, when he received an unusual call from dispatch. Unit 814. We have a report of a vehicle traveling at high speed northbound near your location. Caller reports it passed them at marker 85, estimated speed over 100 miles per hour. Be advised, the caller stated the vehicle appeared to be older model, possibly a muscle car from the 1970s, with no headlights. Carter acknowledged the call and increased his speed, keeping an eye out for the reported vehicle. As he approached mile marker 87, he caught sight of taillights ahead, moving rapidly away from him. The vehicle appeared to be exactly as described, a 1970s muscle car. Dark color, traveling at high speed with no headlights. The first anomaly appeared when Carter closed the distance. The vehicle was indeed traveling at over 100 miles per hour. Yet it handled the curves of the highway with an ease that seemed impossible for a car of its age. Carter activated his emergency lights and siren, initiating a pursuit. The pursuit continued for several miles, with the muscle car maintaining its speed despite the trooper's presence. What struck Carter as unusual was the lack of any reaction from the other vehicle. The driver didn't slow down, pull over, or attempt to evade in any conventional way. The car simply continued northbound at a constant high speed, as if unaware of or unconcerned by the patrol car behind it. As they approached mile marker 91, the muscle car suddenly decelerated, pulling onto the shoulder with a smoothness that defied its previous speed. Carter followed, positioning his patrol vehicle as per standard procedure. He radioed dispatch to update them on the situation, his voice calm despite the adrenaline of the pursuit. Dispatch, Unit 814. The vehicle has pulled over at mile marker 91, northbound. I'm approaching the vehicle now. The response came immediately. Copy, Unit 814. Proceed with caution. Backup is approximately 5 minutes out. Carter approached the muscle car on the driver's side, flashlight in hand, his training taking over despite the unusual circumstances. The vehicle was a classic 1970s Dodge Challenger, black with a racing stripe, in pristine condition. As Carter neared the driver's window, he aimed his flashlight inside and discovered something impossible: the car was empty. The escalation began when Carter tried the driver's side door and found it unlocked. As he opened it, he noted that the interior was as pristine as the exterior, with no signs of wear or use. The keys were in the ignition, the engine still running, but there was no driver. Carter immediately called for backup, his voice now betraying his confusion. Dispatch, this is Unit 814. The vehicle is empty. I repeat, the driver is gone. The vehicle is still running. As Carter waited for backup, he conducted a search of the area. The desert terrain west of the highway was rugged and would have been difficult to navigate, especially in the dark. Yet there were no footprints, no signs of movement in any direction. It was as if the driver had simply vanished from inside the moving vehicle. The quiet climax occurred when Carter decided to turn off the engine of the muscle car. As he reached for the keys, he noticed something on the passenger seat, a single photograph. Carter picked it up with a gloved hand and examined it in his flashlight beam. The photograph showed a group of young people in 1970s clothing standing in front of the same muscle car. They were smiling, happy, completely unaware of the fate that might await them. What made Carter's blood run cold was the realization that one of the people in the photograph was the spitting image of himself. The resemblance was uncanny: same facial features, same build, even the same determined look in his eyes. Carter felt a profound sense of unease, as if he had stumbled upon something that was never meant to be found. The aftermath was documented in DPS Report 2006-18814. When backup arrived, they found Carter standing beside the muscle car, the photograph in his hand. The responding troopers searched the vehicle and surrounding area, but found no trace of the driver. The muscle car's VIN was traced to a vehicle that had been reported stolen from a dealership in Phoenix in 1978. The car had never been recovered, and the insurance case had been closed decades ago. There was no explanation for how the vehicle could have appeared on the highway in 2020 in such pristine condition. Perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the case was the photograph. When it was analyzed by forensic experts, they confirmed that it was indeed an original photograph from the 1970s, not a modern reproduction. The people in the photograph were identified through facial recognition software, but none of them matched any missing persons records. The person who resembled Carter remained unidentified. The investigation was officially closed after 2 months due to lack of leads. The muscle car was taken to a secure DPS facility for further examination, where technicians discovered that its engine and other mechanical components were in perfect working order, as if they had been manufactured yesterday rather than over 40 years ago. Carter never forgot his experience with the Phantom Pursuit. In the years that followed, he became interested in cold cases from the 1970s and 1980s, particularly those involving missing persons and stolen vehicles. He occasionally wondered about the photograph and the strange resemblance to himself, but he never found any answers. No explanation was ever found for the driverless muscle car that led Carter on a high-speed chase through the Arizona desert before vanishing into the night, leaving behind only a vintage photograph and a trooper with more questions than answers. The American landscape remains vast and unknowable. Along the lonely stretches of highway that crisscross this country, there are places where the veil between the known and the unknown seems to thin. Mile marker 89 on Interstate 17 in Arizona is one such place, a corridor where trained professionals, sworn to uphold reality and document facts, find themselves questioning the very nature of that reality. These 7 accounts, drawn from official reports and eyewitness testimony, represent only a fraction of the unexplained phenomena documented in this area. They share common threads: radio voices that shouldn't exist, vehicles that vanish without trace, figures that appear and disappear like mirages in the desert heat, and a profound silence that speaks louder than any sound. They are stories of missing time, of objects returned from decades past, of encounters that leave no physical evidence, but change those who experience them forever. What is most compelling about these incidents is not their sensational nature, but their quiet consistency. Across decades, different officers with no connection to each other have reported similar experiences in the same location. They are not seeking attention or fame. In many cases, they are reluctant to share what they have seen, knowing the professional and personal skepticism they will face. Yet they document these events because they are trained to observe, to report, to acknowledge what is in front of them, even when it defies explanation. The desert surrounding mile marker 89 holds its secrets closely. It is a landscape of extremes, scorching heat by day, bitter cold by night, profound silence interrupted by the howl of coyotes or the roar of a distant thunderstorm. It is a place where the horizon seems to stretch into infinity, where the stars shine with an intensity that makes one feel small and insignificant. Perhaps it is this very quality, the sense of being on the edge of something vast and mysterious, that makes it a conduit for the unexplained. These stories do not offer answers. They do not provide neat explanations or satisfying conclusions. Instead, they remind us that there are still mysteries in this world, phenomena that exist beyond our current understanding of science and nature. They challenge our assumptions about what is real and what is possible, inviting us to consider that the universe may be stranger and more complex than we can imagine. If you or someone you know has a true story to share, leave it in the comments below. The most compelling accounts are often those that are the most personal, the most quietly disturbing, the most resistant to easy explanation. They are the stories that keep us awake at night, not with terror, but with wonder, with the humbling realization of how much we have yet to learn. Thank you for watching Sleepless Campfire. Until next time.